This week, let's talk about the first steps of dealing with casts and blocking during the rehearsal process. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this series of videos for Theater 5113, producing the high school play. As usual, we are going to be taking a look at our text, the director's vision, and hey kids, let's put on a show. So we're going to be talking about working with your actors and kind of getting them into blocking the first steps of the rehearsal process. Curtain up, let's go. Chapters 14 and 15 of the director's vision focus on working with actors. So there is a part 1 and a part 2 of this. In chapter 14, it starts by talking about some of your responsibilities as the director in setting a creative atmosphere. Be comfortable with your learning process and encourage everyone to learn. You need to make sure that you are setting clear goals both at the beginning of the rehearsal and the end of rehearsal of what you'll be working on the next time. Provide leadership by example. The book puts it really well in that if you have to tell someone you're in charge, you are not in charge. You need to lead by example, be prepared but flexible, respect your cast members and their time. Know when to push and when to stand back and just let things happen. Give praise just as often as you give critique, and listen and give attention to all of the members of your cast. Take the work seriously, just not yourself, and make sure that you have established clear guidelines and boundaries. As a director, it is your responsibility to be prompt to rehearsal. In fact, try to arrive early to rehearsal if at all possible. You need to let your performers understand that being late disrupts the creative process, and if it becomes a problem with a particular cast member, you need to be prepared to talk to them about it privately. Once your cast has gathered together, then try to lead them through a warm-up or have a cast member lead them through a warm-up. A lot of times if you have more experienced actors, then they can warm up on their own, but if you warm up as a group, it helps engender a team spirit, and it offers a transitional time between the regular world and the world of rehearsal. Make sure that your actors understand the deadline for memorizing their lines. The more often you rehearse, the easier it's going to be to memorize. Younger actors are probably going to need a little bit more help and a little bit more prompting, and you need to make sure that you've set a schedule to keep everyone on track. Set multiple deadlines for different chunks of the script. It needs to be completely memorized before you enter your tech run. When you are scheduling these deadlines, make sure that the schedule is reasonable. Don't try to make them memorize their lines in 1 week. Make sure that you have communicated the schedule early and that you've given the proper emphasis to how important it is that they need to be off book. Have an assistant rehearse lines with your cast members outside of rehearsals, and make sure that you are rehearsing scenes repeatedly because repetition is going to breed memorization. You want to avoid under-rehearsing your shows, and that's usually caused by not using your scheduled rehearsal time wisely, so you want to make sure that you are setting goals in order to run quality rehearsals. Additionally, you don't want to over-rehearse a show. This is where everything just feels so rehearsed and practiced and there's no emotion behind it anymore. So make sure that you are constantly seeking new approaches to things and experimenting as much as possible to keep things fresh for your actors. And finally, as the director, you are responsible for the ethos of the rehearsal. You have to control the climate and the atmosphere of your rehearsals. Don't be overly focused on the social aspect of the rehearsal, although it is going to happen, so enjoy that. But you need to play into the actor's wants and needs to perform well. You need to find a balance between taking things completely seriously and just the childlike wonder of experimenting with theater. Chapter 15 moves on to the second part of working with actors. You have to think about what's going to motivate your performers. They want recognition and appreciation. They want a truthful performance. They want pride in their craft. They want to belong to a company that has achieved something great. And they want the production to have an impact on their audience and to transcend doubt and anxiety. And as a director, it's your job to help them through all of that. This begins with directing them through the process of character analysis by helping them have information about the playwright, background information on the show, giving them insight into your own play analysis, encouraging the actors to read the script front to back, look for clues in their characters' habits and their emotional states, find the conflicts and the obstacles in each character's path, find the changes in the character. What are the physical and vocal aspects of the character? Maybe they could describe the character in metaphors. And finally, you might encourage your actors to keep a journal of their character in which they can create biographies and backstories for the character. They can divide the scenes into beats of action based off of the character's change in objectives. They need to think about the subtext of each line. What are they really saying? And decide how the character is going to respond to the other characters on stage. Next, look at the 5 W's and the H technique in order to help them develop a character. Number 1, who is the character? Who do they associate with? Number 2, what do they want? What will they do to get it? Number 3, when will they do those things? When is this show taking place? Number 4, where are you on the stage? Where did you come from? Where are you going next? Number 5, why did the playwright put you in the scene? And then your H is number 6, how are you going to achieve your goals? How do you react to what's going on? The text goes on to list a whole lot of internal and external approaches to characterization, such as looking at the objectives, the character's spine, which is their motivational force through the whole play, the process of discovery, what are the obstacles for the character, find the beats, the units of intention, the time between shifts for the character. If you try to focus on too many intentions for that character all at once, then it gets a little bit confusing for the audience and the actor. So how can you boil that intention down to what is the most basic? Find the motivation. Every action, speech, silence, every word on that page has a purpose for that character. Then there's using your imagination to flesh out the character. The director needs to help the actors find possibilities for everything that they are doing on stage. Directors can constantly ask, what if? What if you read the line this way? What if there was an obstacle here? What if there was silence after this line? You give them a what if, and the actor should respond in an action. For more complex characters, you can help the actor practice in isolations. Practice one motivation or emotion at a time so that you can determine when each one is needed. There's also the James Lange theory, which means that emotions are going to be as a result of action. So can you help the actor change their body language in order to change the tone or emotion of a line? Be prepared to lead improv exercises. Help the actor look inside the character, inhabit the character, and react naturally. Work on crowd scenes because every character in that crowd needs to be performing as a character. Everything you do needs to maintain the illusion of the first time. This means that actors need to appear to the audience that this is the first time that this is happening and it's all spontaneous. And finally, when you are offering criticism to an actor, critique the work, but not the performer. Be honest and direct, and when you are pointing out a problem, be sure to give them possible solutions. In chapters 17 and 18, we move on to the information about blocking the play. So in chapter 17, we talk about how blocking is the composition and the movement of each scene. It needs to focus the audience's attention on what's important. And even when the actors are determining their own blocking, the director finally has to make the decision as to what fits the style of their vision. Movement is the action of an actor going from one place on stage to another. Movement attracts audience's attention. So you don't want to move on another actor's line. You want to avoid unnecessary movement, and it shouldn't detract from anything important. It needs to be motivated. It needs to follow the character's wants and needs. It needs to be recognized by the audience. It needs to be in the style and mood of the play, and it needs to be plausible, fitting within the logic of the show and the characters. Gesture is when you are moving, but the body is staying in place, and when you're moving around with props, that's called business. Both of these need to be pointed out during blocking for younger performers because they usually will not come up with these naturally. You have to tell them, point here, wave your hand there, and so on. Composition is everything that the audience sees on stage at a particular time, kind of like a still photograph. It needs to tell a visual story. So place your actors in different planes and positions to create something that is dynamic to look at. If you have a small group composition on stage, that's called a picturization. And the body position of the actor can indicate the character's emotion or the state of mind. Your first steps of blocking need to be either to decide to block on your own before the rehearsal starts, or you're going to block as part of rehearsal with input from the actors. Next, you're going to begin with your entrances and exits of the characters. You're going to block the required movements. If a character has to cross to pick up a phone, block that as well. You're going to block the protagonist first and the key characters, and then fill in everything else. Block your most important scenes first to make sure that they are the most polished. You need to decide how much movement is going to be needed. Watch out for scenes with too much or too little movement from the characters. And finally, avoid excessive movement. If it looks like the character is only moving because the director told them to, it's too much. Chapter 18 starts with talking about some techniques for focusing the audience's attention. The strongest areas of play are going to be in your downstage area just because it is closer to the audience. An open position is going to be more easily recognized to the audience than profile or slightly closed. When working with younger actors, you may have to tell them when to share, give, or take stage. Sharing means that everyone on the stage is equal. If you are giving stage, then you are moving so that another actor can take focus, and taking stage means moving in order to shift the focus to yourself. If you are stealing stage, then you are taking focus away from where it should be. Sometimes this is intentional, but most of the time it's unconscious. And in either case, you need to be able to gently correct the actor. A cross means moving across the stage. A counter is when two characters are moving in opposite direction, usually so that you can switch the focus from one character to another. Eye focus means that the actors are going to look at where they want the audience to look. Separation and contrast means moving a focused character away from other characters to highlight them or give them a different body position from everyone else. If everyone else is sitting, maybe they could be standing. When you're blocking, make sure that you are keeping your important characters free of the furniture. Move things out in the open to make them more obvious. You can also experiment with levels, having some people high, some people low. Usually your more prominent characters are going to be up higher than the others. And when you have 3 actors on stage, recognize that they will constantly be forming a triangle. The apex of the triangle is typically where the audience is going to look. And there are a few practical tips to keep in mind. If you are blocking someone turning, if they are open towards the audience, then that gives focus. If they are turning away from the audience, then that loses focus. The entrances for the characters should be dynamic, and they should only stop once they are completely on stage. And when you're blocking an exit, you may want to block in a slight pause after the exit and have all of your characters look towards the departing character. Your actors need to maintain consistency of the fourth wall. They should not cross that imaginary fourth wall between curtain and audience. A lot of times you can help your actors intensify the emotion by having them make their movements bigger. And finally, it gives some tips for if you are blocking a scene where a lot of characters are at a table. Now, it's easier if you just have 1 or 2 actors, but if you have a lot of people or sometimes your whole cast at a table, then you have to experiment with leaving spaces or having characters move around while in character to deliver lines away from their seat. If you are blocking a crowd scene, occasionally you may want to have someone's back facing the audience just because that's more realistic and it adds some visual interest to the scene. And finally, keep in mind that blocking is going to evolve during rehearsals as your characters and the interplay between them develops, so be prepared to be flexible on things that are maybe a little more in character for the actors. Chapter 4 of Hey Kids, Let's Put on a Show focuses on the rehearsal process. Cast members need to stay engaged during rehearsal time, and you might want to consider using downtime to work on set or props. Use your first read to discuss your vision for the show, go over the script, and explain the design to help everyone start off on the same page. For musicals, you might want to consider holding a musical rehearsal before the first read-through so that you can incorporate the music into the actual read-through. If you have younger actors, the book says that you might consider having a read-through before you have auditions so that they have a better idea of what they're auditioning for. In an educational setting, sometimes you might want to use table work, and that involves reading through the script with your cast and discovering all of the different character bits that are in there and the plot, and answering all of your questions before you stage everything. Your music director is obviously going to be in charge of directing the music, but you need to be communicating regularly so that they understand the blocking and you understand the choreography and the music. The book suggests having the kids listen to Broadway recordings of a show so they can get an idea of how the music's interpreted, especially if they're not able to read music. They need to especially practice the music that's going to be done with the choreography, since once you add dance to it, a lot of times the music just completely leaves their head. Your choreography rehearsal should start early in the process. When working with students, the choreographer needs to remember that things need to be kept simple because a lot of these kids are not dance trained. Block your musical numbers first and then the scenes around them, and try to avoid elaborate scene changes or blackouts, and try to keep things as simple between scenes as possible. Once again, set a clear date that your cast needs to be off book. For a period of time, allow them to call for line, then move on to keep going no matter what, even if you have to improvise. Make sure that they understand not to whisper prompts to each other on stage. During your tech week, try to refrain from costumes and makeup unless you have an elaborate costume change that needs needs to happen that you have to practice. Make sure that your actors understand this is about setting light and sound and practicing the changes, so they're going to have to pause and freeze quietly occasionally. Schedule a dry take so that you can run all the changes without your actors, and then schedule a cue to cue with your actors to make sure that all the changes are clear before you start your dress rehearsals. Speaking of dress rehearsals, try to plan at least 3 of those. Treat them like a full performance with a call time, house open, and your curtain time. Save practicing your curtain call until your dress rehearsal run. At opening night, prepare to give your cast a pep talk and remind them to stay true to everything that they have practiced. Don't try to add anything new during performance. After your performance is your strike, which all of your actors and volunteers need to participate in until tasks have been checked off by your stage manager, and then go on to enjoy the cast party. Chapter 5 is short and sweet, but it does give valuable information about things you need to keep in mind in working with specific kids' ages. In the elementary age, they are eager to earn your praise. They may memorize their lines a little bit earlier than you expect them to, and so you can focus on diction and making sure that the lines are clear and delivered correctly, but still allow them to experiment with how they're delivering the lines. Remember that these are children, not small adults. They lack life experience, and they are not going to know what to do with themselves a lot of time, and that's why you're there to help them. In middle school, this is a time when they are extremely self-conscious, especially boys who are going through a vocal change on stage, and it's kind of hard to put that up in front of a lot of people. They're going to need a lot of extra encouragement, and make sure that you are casting within their ability. Try not to push them too far out of their comfort zone, because at this age, just getting on stage in front of others is a huge accomplishment. Finally, you have your high schoolers. They are a little more concerned with the social aspect of things, so you need to help them balance learning with the camaraderie of being in theater. Many of them will need to be reminded not to neglect their academics just because they are so heavily involved in theater. Help them focus on empowerment and creativity over a polished final product. A lot of times you can give them a lot bigger roles, such as assistant director, stage manager, or choreographer. They can also assist you with tech and with your design. And a lot of times this is a chance for them to bond with their family by encouraging the parents to help volunteer as part of the rehearsal process. Let's talk just a little bit about some of my thoughts on the rehearsal process. I'm talking more as an actor here than as a director, because that's where I've spent more of my time, is acting than in directing. And just speaking as an actor, talking to potential directors here, I have always appreciated directors that were flexible enough to allow me to experiment with a character. A lot of times I will go into a rehearsal, and most of the directors I've worked with know where my body needs to be on stage, and everything in between is up to me. A lot of times, just as a character actress, directors have said, they've told me after the process, I really didn't know what to do with this character until I saw you start playing with it, and then we created something together. So that's always something positive to hear, is that they've allowed you enough flexibility within their vision to come up with something that was beyond what they were expecting in the first place. I've found that a lot of the rehearsal process that is enjoyable, because I love the rehearsal process, and what makes it enjoyable is when you have a very good balance between socializing and actually getting the work done. Finding that balance is a delicate process, and it's something that a lot of directors are going to have to experiment with. Another thing that I appreciate is thinking back to my younger self and having directors that could tell when I was struggling with something and were willing to take the time to work with me line by line on just how something needed to be, when I needed to move, because I didn't have that experience yet. And just for them to take the time to work with me as much as I needed to in order to create a finished project, that was something that I will never forget. Just directors who were so patient with me when I was still learning. One thing that the text keeps talking a lot about that I totally agree with is that you need to have your goals and your vision in mind when you're going into rehearsal. And unfortunately, a lot of the times where things did not work as well was when the director was not organized getting into a rehearsal. They didn't know what we were going to rehearse, or how we were going to rehearse it, or how it was going to be blocked. They just kind of showed up, opened up the script, and went from there. and they didn't really have a clear vision of what they wanted from the characters, what they wanted from the set, what they wanted just for the show in general. And if they don't have a vision, the actors don't have a vision either. And so we were kind of rudderless for a long time, and it's very hard to pull a show together under those conditions. Better preparation makes better rehearsals. The more work you do before that rehearsal starts, the better off the rehearsal is going to go, and therefore the better your actors are going to respond, and the better that overall product is going to be. So that's it for this week's episode. I hope you found this helpful. Once again, if you are interested in checking out the texts for yourself, they are down in the description, so you can click and check them out. But that's all for now. I will see you next time. And scene.